Good morning. Good morning. We are now in our third meeting of the Program Approval Process Workgroup. My name is Stephanie Madden, co-chair delegate representing the 45th District. And so today's agenda will again start with a re-emphasis on the charge of the work group and then go into some presentations around how the work of this work group will impact the workforce needs for the state of Maryland. And so without further ado, let's hear from Michelle Lambert with the Department of Legislative Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jewel, can you share the slides?
Yes, I believe Ben will be.
Oh, sorry, I meant Jewel Harris. Sorry, Joel.
No problem. No problem at all.
So
Hi, I'm sorry. There seems to be a little technical difficulties. It says that we aren't live on YouTube. I just want to double check really quickly. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, we can continue. I'll share the screen now.
Great, thank you, Jewel. Before we start, I just wanted to say that we sent a number of follow-up information to all workgroup members last night. That information is also going to be available on the DLS website under the workgroup page, which has a link in it that you can access all the materials. That's also on the hearing schedule for anybody who's watching the public link right now. There's one item still outstanding, but when that's available, we're going to email it to members and it'll immediately be posted on the workgroup's webpage as well. And just for one moment, I want to thank the DLS team of Shane, Sarah, Stacy, and Kamar, who all worked really hard to get these documents done for you all. It was a real labor of love from all of us to get it done. So just wanted to extend a thank you to them. I also want to flag before we start that if the work group receives any written comments, we're going to put those as well on the work group's website. So if members of the public do want to submit comments, you could reach out to me or Stacy as staff to the work group, and we will make sure those are circulated to the chairs and work group members and posted on the website. That also applies for work group members who represent a constituency of institutions. If you want to do a response for your organization and send that around to commission members, we will circulate and post that as well. I believe the chairs are interested in doing an in-person comment period for members of the public. So we are working on the logistics for that. So with that, as Madam Chair said, I just wanted to center the work group on what today's meeting is about. So as you can see, the work group charge, the two things in yellow are the items that we discussed at the last meeting related to operational missions and 3-year institutional plans. At this meeting, we will be doing what's in green, which is the work group shall include recommendations on whether MPEC should develop mechanisms to ensure that objective data demonstrates that proposed programs support state workforce needs and the economic competitiveness of the state, and that MPEC has sufficient data analytics staff to evaluate these objectives. The next meeting on November 7th, we're going to talk about item number 7, which is about collaboration. And then at the last November meeting, we will do a deep dive in the rest of the recommendations related to the work group, related to the program approval process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Dow from MPEC to talk about currently the state plan and how that incorporates workforce needs.
Thank you. Good morning, work group members. I am Emily Dow. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Academic Affairs at the Maryland Higher Education Commission. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. I was asked to prepare some slides on our current 2022 state plan and the intersection of the state plan with evaluating workforce demand and workforce needs and what that looks like very pragmatically when it comes down to academic program review. So a little bit of background. Next slide, please. By statute, the commission is expected to develop a state plan for higher education that identifies 3 things. the present and future needs for post-secondary education and research throughout Maryland, the present and future capabilities of different institutions and segments of post-secondary education in Maryland, and the long-range and short-range objectives and priorities for post-secondary education and methods and guidelines for achieving and maintaining them. This state plan is developed in consultation with a variety of stakeholders. We form work groups. We make sure that there are institutional representatives along with other sister agency representatives to develop the state plan. The state plan is not a strategic plan for the agency per se. Instead, it's designed to be a plan for the entire state and a guiding document for all stakeholders that engage with post-secondary education. Subsequently, institutions are expected to align their strategic plans and their missions with the current and existing state plan. Next slide, please. So the state plan, the current version was updated in June 2022. The three primary goals from the 2017 plan remained: access, success, and innovation. However, the 2022 plan highlights 8 specific priorities within these goals. Woven throughout the plan is an emphasis on equity and innovation, with specific initiatives identified as either equity-based and/or innovative. Additionally, the 2022 plan highlights the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and highlights the amazing work that our Maryland institutions did to meet students and continue to provide high quality academic programs during that time, and that many of those initiatives now remain on the campuses. I won't go into detail on each priority. Instead, I'll focus on one specific priority that is relevant to academic program review and workforce demand. So next slide, please. Under the second goal of student success, priority 5 notes that we must maintain a commitment to high quality post-secondary education in Maryland. And as you can see on the right side of the screen, there are very specific action items for this priority. The green diamond means that it's an innovative action item, and the 3 horizontal red lines indicate that the action item is centered on equity. And so just reading through those action items, you can see with specificity the expectation, not only just for our agency, but for the state as a whole and for institutions, to identify innovative fields of study, consider specializing as opposed to expanding academic programs, addressing faculty development and training and pedagogy. So with this, next slide, please. We highlight in the state plan this idea of need and market demand. So by regulation, campuses must demonstrate a critical and compelling regional or statewide need before requesting a new academic program or proposing a substantial change to an existing program. We identify 4 specific needs: the need for the advancement and evolution of knowledge, a societal need, including expanding educational opportunities and choices for minority and educationally disadvantaged students, occupational and professional needs relative to upgrading vocational or technical skills or meeting job market requirements, and 4, the need to strengthen and expand the capacity of historically Black colleges and universities to provide high quality and unique educational programs. So those are the 4 types of needs that we highlight that institutions are expected to expand upon when proposing an academic program. Next slide, please. However, need is different from market demand. Market demand can be operationalized as the availability of openings in the job market to be served by the new program. Data regarding market demand may include workforce and employment projections prepared by a variety of stakeholders, including the Maryland Department of Labor, BLS, census data, Department of Commerce, accrediting organizations, licensing boards, and professional and trade associations. There are 2 considerations that I'd like to highlight when determining workforce demand. The first is when there is conflicting evidence about need or demand. Conflicting evidence could be one organization saying that there is demand and projections saying, no, there is no demand. We do not project that there's going to be a need for these individuals. And this conflicting information could be at the state level, it could be regional, or it could be national. And so when we're working through a proposed program, we take all of that information into consideration to ultimately make a decision. So conflicting evidence, we struggle with. The second challenge is emerging fields. It's hard to predict workforce demand for emerging fields. Take, for instance, cybersecurity. What that field looks like is an ever-evolving field, particularly in this day and age. Particularly as new technology arises and new methodologies are developed, the demand for specialized training and skills also shifts and changes. And so that makes targeting workforce demand a little bit tricky when we think about specializations within a particular field as those emerging skills become apparent, and as the institutions work with industry professionals. Next slide, please. I'll end by talking about Maryland Department of Commerce. The 2022 plan highlights 2022 key industries, but recently Maryland Department of Commerce has highlighted new key industries, which are on the right-hand side of your screen. So these are on Maryland Department of Commerce's website. These are the industries that they feel are most appropriate for Maryland and Maryland economy. Three that are bolded that were not in the 2022 list, quantum computing has been added, clean tech, which I bolded because we did have an energy and sustainability, but this idea of clean tech and renewable energy. And the third one is data centers. So these are emerging and important industries for the state per Department of Commerce. I will stop there and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Dr. Dow, for that presentation. Before we move forward, I just want to acknowledge that my esteemed co-chair, Senator King, is with us. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that and grateful that we were able to overcome the tech challenge. And I want to first just kick off with a question actually to some of the members of the work group themselves, particularly those that represent institutions. How do you feel about the work plan, the state plan rather, how it, what relevance does it have to how you lead your institutions, and specifically, do you believe that the details in the state plan around workforce are detailed enough? Dr. Pines.
So it's great to see the new topic areas. I think clearly for our state, data science centers, data centers in general, cybersecurity, quantum computing. But I want to also note that in the manufacturing, it said manufacturing with a slash industry 4.0. And I think there could be some granularity there because I think they're referring to robotics and autonomy and autonomous systems when they say industry 4.0. So I think there could be some granularity that's also applied to that topic on manufacturing.
Thank you. Any other institutional leaders?
I believe Mr. McConkey has his hand up, Madam Chair.
Oh, I apologize. I couldn't see. Please.
Thank you, and appreciate the presentation. Obviously, what's in the state plan is very helpful to our institutions, but there are some questions that perhaps Dr. Dow or others could provide information on, like, for example, on the objective of assessing the present and future capacities of each institution to either meet state need or to meet market demand. What information are you using to make that assessment of present or future capacities of institutions? And then what happens if it's determined if an institution doesn't meet any established criteria in order to help those institutions have a capacity to meet state need or market demand? So those types of questions, I think, might be helpful if we have answers or criteria or something that is measurable, that we can ensure that each institution has that capacity.
Madam Chair, would you like me to respond?
Yeah, Dr. Dell, please do.
Sure. So admittedly, I think you're showing our agency's underbelly a little bit here. Admittedly, I don't think the state plan highlights that in a way that is concrete enough for institutions to take and run with it. So I think that is an opportunity for the next iteration of the state plan to expand upon. I will say, at least from my experience in developing the state plan, there is, I don't want to say resistance, but institutions are cautious to say what their capacity is so that they have enough wiggle room to be comprehensive and expand beyond capacity. So I know there is a consciousness of the things that get put in the state plan and concern that it might be too limiting to define with specificity the capacity of an institution. One, not knowing kind of the long-term consequences of that. Does that then mean an institution could be denied a program because they've been identified as not having capacity to do a particular thing? So there's nuance there, but that doesn't mean there is an opportunity to do that work better or with more specificity.
Okay, Dr. Mallory and then Mr. Power.
Good morning. I'm speaking from the lens of the community colleges. For overall program development, we look not only at the capacity of the institution, but the needs of our immediate county in which we're serving. And so it's important that we address the local concerns and the local issues, and all these take time to plan in advance. Our program planning starts years before we put a curriculum forward to our faculty to approve. And so sometimes it's hard to move fast enough to meet those specified needs. And we appreciate the work that's gone into the plan and the information that's shared. And actually, I'm very happy to see that what we planned in 2019 was listed on the current list, because we have to move nimbly and effectively to make sure we're meeting the needs of all of our stakeholders.
Thank you so much for your feedback, Dr. Mallory. Any response from Dr. Dow?
No, just that we echo that sentiment. We're particularly sensitive to the community colleges and supporting local workforce need, and their program review in light of that, and program development. So that is, while not explicitly stated in the slides that I just presented, it is highlighted in the state plan that the community colleges, by definition, have a unique mission to serve their local areas.
Absolutely. Mr. Power and then Dr. Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to respond to your question, then ask Dr. Dow a question after, if that's all right. I think the state plan, from our perspective, it's well helpful. It's a good plan. It's at the high level that it should be for state planning purposes. At the same time, I think all of us would acknowledge that on the workforce data or new programs, obviously you shouldn't get in that granularity, and it's difficult to translate some of those things into individual programs and evaluating them. But overall, we're certainly supportive of the state plan. I think my question for Dr. Dow is, in the third highlighted area in the state plan academic program review process that you had, you note that meeting job market requirements is part of what you're looking for at MHEC when you're evaluating programs. But then in the next slide, you very specifically say that there's a big difference between need and market demand. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit, because in many ways, they're very similar.
Sure. So, yep. So I have the slides pulled up. So need is defined by 4 things: need for advancement of an evolution of knowledge, societal needs, and then the third one, Mr. Power, as you're highlighting, occupational and professional needs relative to upgrading vocational technical skills or meeting job market requirements. That is specific to the curriculum. That is, listen, we need nurses who know how to use oxygen masks. We need computer scientists who understand the Internet of Things. That is how we would interpret meeting job market requirements. That is different from, is there market demand for individuals with these skills? Does that make sense in terms of the distinction of those 2 things?
It does. I appreciate it. Does that mean that market demand plays no role in the review?
Oh, no, it does. Oh, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. It's just a distinction between need and market demand for individuals with the degree, with the certificate, with those skills. Need for those skills is a different concept.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Jordan?
Now, am I unmuted? I hate iPads. I want you to know that.
You're doing fine.
So I am supportive of what was put on the screens as we talk about needs and market demand. And when we're putting forth a program out of St. Mary's, that's part of the process. You have to do a needs assessment and also a market analysis before it comes up the chain. One of the things I'm not quite understanding, though, is this question of capacity, because that, in my view, has to do also with long-term sustainability of a program when you think about the finances and economics associated with that. So what role does the boards play when you submit a program to MHEC for final review? It should go through your board of trustees, and there should be conversations about that sort of thing. And so where does that weigh in all of this? Because it seems to me that the boards who have fiduciary responsibilities of these institutions should have their finger on the pulse of whether or not that institution has the capacity to run that program and have it long-term sustained. And I'm just missing that in this entire process. So I think that's a comment more than a question, but it is something that is just bothering me, because it seems to me asking an outside institution to speak to capacity, that's really challenging. But then I also know that sometimes maybe there might be a board or 2 that might stretch what their capacity is, but where's the balance there, and what role do the boards play?
I'm happy to respond if that's okay. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, President Jordan, your question speaks to process. So academic program proposals, particularly for new programs with a kind of a nuanced process, require board approval before it comes to our agency. So the expectation is just as you highlighted, that boards are very much engaged with making a decision about institutional resources, capacity, if this is appropriate for the institution's mission, before that proposal even comes to us. I am not familiar with boards. My understanding is that many times by the time it gets to a governing board, a proposal is green-lighted to move forward to MHEC. So it's a conversation that maybe MHEC should be having with governing boards on the regular to make sure they understand the importance of their role and what this looks like for larger state impact.
Dr. Jordan, did you want to follow up? Sorry, I'm just reading facial expressions. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
doing too-
I'm letting it marinate a little bit because I think that I missed something in this conversation. So I'm going to follow up probably with Dr. Dow later on.
No problem. Secretary Wright?
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Really, some good observations here. So this workforce need is one aspect of program approval process. It's not everything. Think about emerging areas, or jobs that do not exist today, right? We have to prepare our higher education system to prepare students for the jobs that will be there 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And especially for our PhD programs, graduate programs, creation of new knowledge, creation of intellectual properties, creation of startups, new companies that will create jobs for future, right? So when academic programs are considered at different campuses, that's also something that MHAC, we will be paying close attention to those areas. We want to be the number one in quantum computing and advanced computing and other areas. We want those kinds of research and graduate work done at our campuses of higher education so we can be economically more competitive. So again, workforce existing needs is one thing, but as a state, we want to be proactive, not reactive. Once the need is there, shortages are there, then we start thinking about academic programs and other things. So we have to allow for programs to move forward where there is an emerging needs.
Thank you. Madam Chair King, I apologize for not seeing you. Oh, you're on mute. There you
Yep. Okay. I'm sorry about my internet this morning. Verizon has let me down for the first time, but I'm working on it. I had a question about input from stakeholders. Have we talked to any of the members of the commission and asked for their input? Because I'm sure they have opinions on how we work through this, but I don't know that we have heard from them.
And do you mean about the work, about the state plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the state plan is approved by the commission. As many of you know, we have a number of new commissioners between 2022 and 2023. And I understand that there is some initial conversations about maybe thinking through a revision or a facelift of the current state plan. But we do engage with the commissioners. In the past iterations of writing the state plan, commissioners have co-led the writing groups. They've been involved in that process. So we make sure that they are involved. And
Okay.
they even recommend stakeholders and other entities to participate.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see you, Mr. McClunky. I just want to follow up on something that Chair King led us to, is that because we have a new secretary for the commission, largely new commission and a new governor, it does seem, in my opinion, very appropriate for the work plan to be revisited and updated in short order. And I also just want to put out there for reaction, it seems like it would be appropriate for the MGA to have some type of oversight on some type of interval to ensure that the state plans are always current on some agreed upon timeline so that there's never kind of a unnecessary drag. So I don't know what people think about that. And then after that, I will move on to Mr. McClunky. Okay, everyone agrees with me. Mr. McClunky, I'm just checking.
There. I just wanted to comment briefly again, appreciating Dr. Jordan's comments that she's going to let things marinate. I feel like we're in a position right now where we're marinating a lot of things. And one of the things I'm marinating is how we do all of this within the parameters of existing law. So just for example, with this immediate discussion we're having with respect to capacity of institutions. You know, the law would require and has for a long time in Maryland that the historically Black colleges and universities be comparable to and competitive with the traditionally white institutions in all operations, in all facets of their operations and programs. And so when we're looking at state need and market demand, and whether or not an institution has capacity to meet either need or demand, I think as a work group, we want to help in our recommendations so that it's not just an analysis of, okay, here's the state need or here's the market demand, and one institution doesn't have that capacity to meet it. Therefore, we don't approve the program there. We move to another institution that has that capacity to meet it. I still think we need to determine how we can help the state answer those questions so that institutions are in a position to be able to offer those programs, that they have the capacity to operate those programs and so forth. I'm kind of marinating that with all of you, but it's important that if there's an established state need, or if there's a market demand established, that an HBCU, for example, be in a position to be able to offer that program as well. Or perhaps the state's obligation is to enhance or prepare an HBCU or any institution to be in a position to be able to offer those programs.
Any response from MHEC to Mr. McConkey before I go to Senator Watson?
Agreed. It's this, I think this hits at the heart of some of the challenges we face around academic program review. And I think there's a interwoven thread here around mission and institutional identity and strategic planning. And if I can just think out loud for a minute, I think which comes first? Institutions identifying their long-term plans and we evaluating that and then shaping a larger state plan based on that? Is it the alternative? We're shaping a larger state plan and then institutions fit into that plan. I think it's got to be a little bit of a mix of both, and that this is an ever evolving, maybe the state plan isn't just, something that is updated with years in between. It's something that is updated on an annual or every 18 months, because as everybody has noted, industry needs change, capacity for institutions change depending on what's going on in the economy. So I think maybe we need to be reflective on, this isn't something that happens every 3, 4, 5 years. This is something that we need to be evaluating on the more regular. And we being not just the agency, we can certainly take the lead, but as a more collective, who's doing what, how, and when, so that we're not stepping on each other's toes. We are serving the needs of our students, and more importantly, the needs of our state, or more importantly, the needs of our students, and then the needs of the state. So those are, I apologize. I know I thought a little bit out loud, and Secretary Rye, I apologize if I've overstepped.
Secretary Rye, thank you so much, Dr. Dow.
Thank you. So Dr. Dow pretty much answered the question, but at MHEC, we are looking at the state plan. We are looking at state completion goals. We are looking at current challenges for the state and opportunities that are ahead of us. And we will be looking at revising the plan and, setting up some goals. It will take a few months or so, but it is on our commission's agenda for tomorrow's meeting, and that will be discussed there. So,
thank you. Senator Watson.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, Co-Chair. This has been a really, really good discussion, and I appreciate the comments from Mr. McConkey and others. And so, capacity. When I first think of capacity, I think of a bus that can hold 200 people, and it's only 100 people on it. It has capacity for more. But capacity with respect to programs and business, you build capacity. It doesn't have to be that you build capacity. That's what every business does when they want to grow a new business area. And so I wanted to see, based on experience, when it comes to this question of capacity, is there an opportunity for the state through funding to help, say, an HBCU, which is smaller in size than many other, colleges and universities? But some people look at capacity as how much space do you have? Can you accommodate the staff? And yes, those are all things to be considered. But in an effort to be fair and allow all colleges and universities to thrive, when I think of capacity, growing capacity, there has to be some monetary component. Can somebody speak to that historically? I mean, I'm sure that if there was a college or university, a single one, without any colleges, around for 50 miles, and there was a need, the state would do whatever they needed to do to ensure that that single college or university can accommodate that identified need. But in a space like ours, where we have many colleges and universities in close proximity, I'm still not grasping how we deal with the capacity issue, if that is going to be a criterion for making a selection about a program. Can somebody speak to that a little bit for me? Or you might want to marinate like the rest of us been doing and give me an answer a little bit later, but just thinking about it. Thank you very much.
And if you have an epiphany and would like to answer Senator Watson at some other time during the duration, I invite you to do so as well. Thank you for that important statement. I believe, Dr. Jordan, did you have your hand up?
I had my hand up for a moment and then I put it down, but Dr. Dow said something that's really important that I think that we also cannot lose sight of. I understand building capacity, but one of the things that you listed was, how is the institution going to do whatever? The how part is really important because that also takes into account ability and capability and the types of students that are being attracted and what those students need. And so I think we cannot lose sight of, in this conversation, the how part. So what is important? What does the state need? What does the society need? And the students do it. What do these institutions offer? How do they offer it? And who's attracted to that kind of institution? I think that has to be part of this discussion, because it goes back to institutional missions. We all have different missions, and how we do what we do will differ depending on who our targets are. And somehow I think that this has a tendency to get lost in these discussions because we can't, and this is just my personal feeling, we want everyone to do the best they can, but not everybody gets the same gold star, right? There is going to be some stratification in what and how we do things and who we're targeting. And one of the questions is, how much tolerance is there going to be in the system for that? So just another Tawanda thing to marinate.
I want to probably throw something else in there for our collective marinating, is that when we're discussing workforce needs and trends, and also discussing what's best not only for Maryland students, but for the Maryland economy, I know that the recent Supreme Court decisions around affirmative action may have maybe chilled some considerations around representation, but I feel like how representative the workforce is of Marylanders in these high need emerging fields, I don't see how we can responsibly ignore that, and how the considerations we're making here will either reinforce existing gaps or could account for them and fill them. And I think that's something I just want us to think about very deliberately, because we have enough data to show that in the delivery of healthcare in various sectors, that what the workforce looks like can actually impact patients' care, their longevity, and their ability to navigate certain systems. So I feel like we're having a conversation that's not accounting for not only who gets to enter the workforce in what roles, but also the impacts for the rest of Marylanders that interact with these professionals that we're endeavoring to develop. So I just wanted to lift that up. I think we've had a really good conversation on this first presentation, but there's one more presentation and I don't want to lose any of you very, very important people before that. So I think it's appropriate at this time to perhaps put a button on this discussion and move forward with the second presentation by Ben Irwin of the Education Commission of the States for a national perspective. Thank you.
Perfect. Should I share my screen? Oh, perfect. Sorry about that. Jump the gun.
Kara, I think we're a couple of slides further down. If you could just scroll through for Ben.
Thank you.
Keep going. It should be
One. Oh, yeah.
Yep. Keep going. There we go. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for having me today. I'm Ben Irwin. I'm a senior policy analyst with Education Commission of the States, and I had an opportunity to dig into state higher education strategic plans and put together the memo that was shared with the agenda ahead of the meeting today. I primarily looked at or researched strategic plans for higher ed that were developed by state offices, agencies, boards, or commissions that have direct oversight of post-secondary institutions. Excuse me, sorry. And then I also looked into state workforce reporting. So looking at data from state departments of labor, state workforce boards or commissions, in addition to any plans that have come from state workforce agencies. So we can go to the next slide. So over the next few minutes, I'll highlight some general takeaways from my research, including information on how these plans are developed, if there are any state policy requirements. We'll take a quick look at state goals and metrics, and then discuss workforce data and reporting in the states that we researched. We can go to the next slide. So most of the states that we dug into, it was a total of 17. They have a plan for higher education that is typically developed by a higher ed agency, a commission, or a board, similar to the Maryland Higher Education Commission. Some states like Mississippi have even linked institutional planning into their state plan for higher ed. So their Board of Regents released a strategic plan, and within that document, each institution's plan is included as well. And we also looked at some state systems of higher education that have developed strategic plans. So for example, in North Carolina, the UNC system and the community college system have two separate strategic plans that are in service of the state's attainment goal, but they're a little more targeted to those institution types and to the communities those institutions are serving. So I wanted to highlight that they weren't necessarily captured as a state with a strategic plan for higher ed, but there are plans for each subset of institutions as well. While most of the plans that we identified cover a set period of time, we did find that California's master plan, which was driven by the legislature, was first adopted in 1960, but hasn't been updated since 2002. So it's not necessarily up to date with their current priorities in the state with their different post-secondary systems. We found that 9 states have statutory requirements for state planning. They're typically pretty vague, directing an institution to develop a strategic plan. They may highlight key components around goal setting or institutional capacity, but I will say in my research of some of these strategic plans, itself doesn't necessarily like perfectly align with the statutory requirements. And even if statute directs the institution or the agency to address workforce needs, they aren't really prescriptive on what that looks like. So I think it could be up for interpretation how in-depth the plan goes on some of those required components. And then we did find that 4 states require the plan to be updated on a specific cadence. So this could be anywhere from what we saw from like 2 years to 12 years. In Washington, they have a unique approach where they have a 10-year master plan And then they have 2-year strategic plans and kind of in service of that 10-year master plan. So it almost serves as a progress report, but also a way to kind of adjust their strategies and their priorities in service of that larger master plan as well. And lastly, on plan development for states without strategic plans developed by a higher ed agency or board, those states may have an attainment goal that's really central to a lot of their planning, even if they don't have a strategic plan organized around it. And we also saw that in some of those states, I think Delaware is an example off the top of my head. They have a strategic plan that was developed by their workforce development board, but that involves higher ed, that includes attainment metrics, that includes a role for post-secondary education. So we've seen kind of the lines blurred between which agency really leads on the planning, but states are really thinking about how they can better link post-secondary education and workforce and the workforce system. And then I guess one last note would just be, I wanted to call out Ohio on plan development. They have a workforce development or a plan driven by their workforce development council, but that's in service of their state attainment goal. And they also require institutions to develop completion plans that outline how they're both retaining and helping students through to degree completion that's kind of in service of that state attainment goal as well. We can go to the next slide. I think I've alluded to it a few times, but most of the state plans that we identified really center their strategies around supporting the state attainment goal, whether it's 60% of the population with a post-secondary credential by 2025, 2030. These goals look a little bit different from state to state in terms of the percentage or the timeline, but we typically see between 55 and 70% as the target, with 2025 to 2030 as kind of the target year for reaching that goal. Most of the plans that are centered around attainment goals typically identify between like 3 and 5 priorities in service of achieving that goal. A lot of times they include increasing affordability, increasing access for underserved student groups, using student progress metrics that account for each stage of the student's journey. So they might look at priorities around retention. They may look at priorities around enrollment. And then finally, states will also call out workforce alignment and workforce outcomes as a key priority in service of that state attainment goal. We also found a couple of states that try to include regional goals or regional profiles to better inform their strategic plan. We saw that in Arkansas and Pennsylvania, in Arkansas, I believe they highlighted regional degree gaps. So looking at the population, looking at the attainment level of the population in certain regions or counties, identifying areas of need or I guess credential areas that they need to increase. So there are X number of associate's degrees in 2020. The goal is in this region is to raise that by 5% by 2025. And then in Pennsylvania, what we found is they had regional profiles that shared demographic information for each region. They also highlighted the 5, as determined by their Workforce Development Council, the 5 in-demand professions or occupations in that region. And I believe they're using vacancy data to determine that. But I thought those regional profiles were worth highlighting as a way states are thinking about addressing workforce needs in their plans as well. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight North Carolina's system plan. They did call out specific industries. It isn't a strategic plan for all institutions in the state. It's just the 4 years or the 4-year public institutions, but they highlighted the STEM fields and teaching as priority areas within their institutions because they're broader state workforce needs, or primarily because they're broader state workforce needs. And we can go to the final slide. Sorry, yeah, for workforce data, a lot of this information wasn't necessarily housed in the higher education office or with a commission on higher ed. the reporting agencies for in-demand occupations, in-demand fields of study were predominantly labor departments or workforce councils and boards. Typically, when education information is included in this reporting, it's looking at the required education for specific occupations that are in high demand. So what we found is a lot of states will have not job boards, but they'll have workforce data reporting on specific jobs that includes the number of vacancies. It may include projections for that field, in addition to wage data, and then required education and training. And a lot of times these are designed to be very user-friendly for individuals who are exploring different career options. And this is a direction we're seeing more and more states go, trying to create these different tools for individuals who are at different stages of their educational journey. They may have stopped out, they may be a high school student comparing post-secondary options, but these repositories really try to provide the information that kind of an individual education consumer would need to make an informed choice. We've also seen states move in the direction of creating credential registries. So thinking about what does a credential include? So what are the competencies that someone has demonstrated to earn that credential, whether it's non-degree or a bachelor's degree? What are the career opportunities with that credential, and what are the career outcomes? So I think Pennsylvania's state system of higher ed is developing their credential registry with all the credentials at their public 2 years and 4 years to get a better understanding of the value of certain credentials and the demand for them moving forward. I know I kind of rambled at you there for a few minutes, but that was a majority of the information that we were looking through was around those state strategic plans, and in addition to the workforce data reporting. Be happy to answer any questions or try to provide more context on some of the examples I highlighted. But yeah, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Just wanted to, remind folks that this comparison was really looking at certain states that we had seen as having some commonality with. And so we thank you for pulling that together. Are there any questions or feedback related to what was shared? All right, I don't see anything. Looks like you're getting off a little light today, Ben. So
Madam Chair, it looks like Matt Power has his hand raised.
I apologize, Matt, Mr. Power.
Thank you so much. I'll just say thank you for the presentation. I thought it was extremely helpful, and the matrix that you put together was fantastic. Sort of getting back to Michelle's first point of us coming up with objective data to be used for workforce demand. In that matrix, you see all the other states have another entity sort of identifying what the workforce needs are. And candidly, when you watch these program approval objections play out, I feel for the commissioners, because each institution comes in saying there is a demand, the other one says there isn't a demand, and having that single source of truth that I think other states have would be exceedingly helpful, I think, for the state of Maryland. So thank you for the presentation, the analysis. It's really helpful.
Mr. McConkey.
Thanks again for that presentation. I think there is a lot of helpful information there, and the comparisons are helpful. I'll just comment what I think is obvious to all of us, and that is that we have to look at this and develop our state plan consistent with our legal obligations as a state, as a former de jure segregated state. That puts additional obligations upon us that many other states don't have, and it also impacts the way we respond to market demand and the analysis that's given to us for market demand and state need to ensure that we have a desegregated system of higher education that provides equal education opportunity for students wherever they may be. That's obvious to all of us. I just thought that it's an additional comment that should be made to this very good presentation.
Thank you. Are there any other hands up?
I did have one note on the
Oh, yes, Ben.
The identification of in-demand occupations and fields of study. I think one thing that I left out of my presentation is just that states may include a definition of a high demand occupation in statute, or they might direct an agency to take the lead in identifying high demand occupations. But I would say they're usually politically fraught conversations with a lot of different components that go into those decisions. I think you'll see in some fields that a occupation might have demand, there might be quite a few vacancies, but if the wage data isn't there to back up kind of pursuing that credential, then it might not make an in-demand occupation list. So I think there are a lot of elements that go in to defining demand, how or what sort of data is going into those decisions is a really important piece that I think a lot of states are grappling with, because there are a lot of trade-offs in how you're making those decisions. So just wanted to highlight that as well.
And I just wanted to note just something I was thinking about in light of yesterday's announcement from the White House that various locations across the country are identified as various forms of a technology hub, and how that plays into, it's either a recognition of something that's already happening or also a seed planting for something, that they would like to see happen more in the future. And so it seems like there's sometimes things that kind of exist outside of traditional workforce statistics that might be more helpful around innovative, kind of trends that don't always show up as readily in those data sources. Any other questions or feedback? I know that many people are probably still digesting and reviewing the matrix that you received. So I totally understand if you need some more to spend more time with it, and it probably would inform a more robust discussion next time, having had the opportunity, to review that more closely, in addition to having this great presentation from Ben. But I wanted to give my fellow co-chair opportunity to say anything that she might want to share with the group.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
I don't think I have anything to add this morning, but I do think it's been a pretty interesting presentation. I guess I'm a little concerned because I see December 1st coming up pretty quickly. So at some point we've got to get it all together.
Yes, we have to put the pedal to the metal, as they once said in the 20th century. And so I look forward to us really kind of stepping up these interactions to, as I think Mr. McConkey said early on, we really need to give MHEC more to work with in terms of some more specificity, because I believe that their intentions are not being equipped with more specific guidance that I think could really, really enhance their capabilities. But I also think there's a role for the MGA to be a bit more actively engaged. And that is something that we're going to be able to talk through in the weeks ahead. And we have to talk through them very, very shortly. And so if there's nothing else for the good of the order, I want to say thank you for all of your participation today. It's been a very robust discussion. Thank you for all the presenters for your time and expertise. And I know we're waiting for some additional feedback from DLS that's currently being refined to be shared for our collective, consideration in the days and weeks ahead. So you'll probably see some stepped up communications from the work group leadership and staff. And so please just carefully review your inboxes and be ever ready. And we look forward to the next several meetings. So anything else, Madam Chair?
I can't think of anything, no.
I want to give you the honor, since you have persevered through technology challenges and your phone is currently off mute, if you would like to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, I think because there doesn't seem to be any more business for today, that we will adjourn until when is the next meeting?
November 7th.
November 7th. Sorry.
Okay, we'll be ready.
Thank you.